Welcome back to Radically Rational Radio. In this episode, we're going to talk about how the Fed is lying to us about the numbers and just another reason why our education system sucks. We don't even know when we're looking at this data how to properly question it. We assume what they say is true, even though we know that they're trying to draw a pretty picture. I'm personally excited to be showing a Valuetainment clip. I love these guys. Philosophically, I line up with them on almost everything, and the day will come where I'll get to have an engaging conversation with them. Let's jump into it.
Jobless claim rise sharply to highest level since 2021. Again, this is a Fox Business story. Let's see this year. The number of Americans filing for unemployment benefits last week reached the highest level since 2021, with initial claims surging to by 22,000 to 264. This figure is well above the pre-pandemic average of 218 claims and marks the sharpest level of jobless claims since October 2021. Continuing claims, which represent Americans continuously receiving unemployment benefits, rose slightly to 1.81 million, indicating a potential cooling off in the historically tight labor market. Economists anticipate further increases in unemployment as a result of rising interest rates, leading to potential reductions in consumer and business spending. The Fed's projections suggest that officials expect the unemployment rate to rise above 4.6% by the end of next year, up from a current 3.5%. This could result in over 1 million job losses by the end of this year. Tom, what are your thoughts on this story?
Well, this is exactly what the Fed wanted to cause, is with whether they're the direct cause of it or it's now we're going through a cycle because we had overhired in 20 and 21. But this is what the Fed wants to see, is rising unemployment, and jobless claims is where it starts. What's really interesting is right now the unemployment rate, according to government, is 3.4%. And so that's 5.7, almost 5.75 million people unemployed officially. But then we have this 1.9 million jobless claims in there. So when you look at this and say that the last week, the week's claims is 264,000. That's like 25% of the current jobless claims. So it looks like this is inflating. LinkedIn came out, yet another tech company just laid off a little under 1,000 people. And the list of tech layoffs, we had a couple sheets in here, it was just incredible. Morgan Stanley, 3,000, 3M, 6,000, to name a couple companies that were outside tech. The headlines have been tech layoffs, but it's all coming. And people have been asking, what does this mean? Does this mean the recession is here? Remember, that's what they're asking. Does this mean that he keeps interest rates flat in June when he gets along? About 2 months ago, they had gone in and revised the definition of seeking work. And it was actually 5.1 million were had, quote, given up. And so they pulled them out of the 166 million total workforce that they estimate, right?
Yeah.
62% participation rate, about 166 million people in the workforce. And what they did, they pulled it out. But if you put the two together and you doubled it, the unemployment rate, instead of being at that point 4, would have still been closer to 7.75.
Yeah. And the birth-death model. There's an adjustment for the headline non-farm payroll, which is birth-death. So what they try to do, it's not human beings, it's businesses. So what they try to do is guess how many businesses were started and then how many businesses failed within that time frame. And then since that's, I don't know why they can't report, but for some reason those brand new businesses can't report, so they have to guess as to how many jobs were actually created based on how many LLCs came into existence. And what's odd is they just assume that every single LLC that's created has X amount of employees. And as an entrepreneur,
that's how they're guesstimating.
Yeah, that's one of the ways they do that. And they took out that adjustment for the birth-death model. And then if you do that, then it was basically zero, and it was much, much lower, which will most likely next month get revised even lower than that headline number. So it's all this kind of financial engineering, so to speak, that's making the jobs numbers look as good as they can. And keep in mind, that's the only thing that the Fed and the central planners and the Janet Yellen types have to say, hey, look at how great the economy is, because every single other metric that they have, that even the Fed said like a year ago, that this is how you tell if we're in a recession.
Speaking of suspicious, remember we did this on the podcast 2 weeks ago, how Biden created 10 million new jobs, whatever the crazy number was, Rob, you probably have the link, but it turned out it was just people who basically were fired during COVID and then just got their jobs back. These aren't really created jobs. So it sounds like you can inflate a lot of these numbers.
What do we expect? Naturally, that's going to bring down inflation because spending is the first thing that stops. And only after spending stops do people stop hiring people. And so the job numbers are coming down. They are manipulated.
And they lag.
But I think more importantly, I think this is probably the more important thing. The Fed's mandate is based on a concept which was debunked. So the Fed's mandate is based on inflation and unemployment. That's what the Fed looks at. And if you've been looking at what Jerome Powell has been doing and saying, no matter what happens around it, no matter what we think about the banking collapse or whatever else, we're focused on inflation and we're focused on unemployment. And that's really where the focus area is. And I think that the mandate of the Fed for this kind of scenario is probably wrong. And I like this in the Fed, but
back and ask yourself, what does that mean? As he thought that unemployment would be at double digits, that the Fed would most likely be at 0% by the end of this year.
Well, George, what you're saying is pretty shocking. You're saying it's at 3.5% now by the end of the year. I thought you were talking about unemployment rate.
Well, yeah, I'm sorry. I'm talking about unemployment as well. So unemployment goes from 3.5% to double digits by the end of this year. And the recession that's producing that causes the Fed to take rates, Fed funds, down from, let's say, 5% all the way back down to 0%. And and then think about what type of economy. Think about the banking crisis.
Right. And if you look at what the Fed narrative is now, we're going to continue raising until the data says otherwise. I wish they would say something like what they really wanted to say. But I do think that there is something else that threatens the job market and could cause mass unemployment. And I don't think it's going to happen in the next 3 to 6 months, but I do think it's going to happen in the next 12 to 18 months. And that's AI. So I think no one is forecasting for the dramatic change that AI is going to have on people's jobs. Because right now it's just chatbots and we're seeing the beginning of it. But remember that AI technologically does that.
Yeah.
And I think that that's going to cause a lot of people to lose their jobs. And I don't think we've recreated the new jobs as quickly as we're going to lose the old jobs. And I think that's a big thing that we've got to look out for. As I say, I don't think it's 3 to 6 months from here, but I do think that 12 to 18 months from here, we've got a massive jobs problem, and we're going to have a lot of unemployed people.
So if you like this clip and you want to watch another one, click right here. And if you want to watch the entire podcast, click right here.
They said it right off the top. The Fed is only concerned about interest rates and unemployment, and yet we believe their reports. No one reports themselves honestly, especially when there's no accountability. This is the government we're talking about. They're not about holding themselves accountable. They're about making excuses for why they didn't get it done. They mention unemployment a lot. Now, they mention that the unemployment number is inaccurate, and they keep moving it. Collectively, there's been over 300,000 jobs lost this year, most of it being in the tech sector, and now companies like Vice and BuzzFeed are going out of business, causing additional cuts. The federal government's unemployment insurance fund is about to get stretched really tight. We're going to have a strange influx of unemployment data. As we keep talking about raising our debt limit, and we never talk about budgets that we could slash, can we please remember that we put 80,000 jobs in the IRS? They haven't hired all of them. We have a bunch of private citizens who had private jobs that are about to be hired by the federal government. This is dangerous. You get a de facto authoritarianism when the bulk of your country works for the state and not for themselves. We need more private citizens than state employees. This is going to hurt, but I assure you the government is not going to use AI to reduce jobs. They're going to keep hiring, and we don't have the money. I don't know why anyone isn't saying it out loud. There are hundreds of trillions of dollars that we could cut in federal spending, and we know the reason it doesn't happen is because it's all government jobs. They all vote, and they won't vote for their job to be gone. They don't want to be unemployed. It is perfectly okay when Google cuts 30,000 employees. It's perfectly okay when Facebook cuts 25,000 employees. When was the last time you heard a government agency cutting its employees? And the federal government, like a child who wants to take its ball and go home, if we refuse to raise this artificial debt limit, basically just allow inflation nonstop, and with interest rates being higher, it's only going to compound the issue. And what do they say? Well, if you don't raise the debt limit, we shut everything down. That's crazy. That is the most childish thing that you could possibly do. Thanos only took half. We have to stop giving our federal government any additional power. Thankfully, this year, we actually have solid candidates who are either anti-woke, anti-federal government, or pro-America. I'll take any of them. After watching Biden give a 30-minute speech saying white supremacy is our country's greatest issue, it worries me that critical race theory really does pollute when I wish nothing more than personal prosperity. I just think it needs to be worked for, and it needs to be expected that you do it. I hope you learned something. I'm Tristan with Radically Rational Radio. Like, comment, subscribe. I'll talk to you in the next episode. Stay resilient.